The Young Academy of Europe has been working with the Budapest Hub of Academia Europaea for a few years now, each year trying to run one of these events to kind of broaden participation in the ERC mechanism, to encourage people to really take advantage of this exciting way of advancing the forefront of our fields. So we're really excited to offer you this opportunity to hear some insights from those people behind the scenes, working with the machinery of the ERC and over the first hour, and then in the second hour, you will be able to split into your different domains, social science and humanities, physical sciences and life sciences, and hear advice from people who have recently gained a starting grant about some of their experiences, some of the things they were mindful of, and you should be as well. So at this stage, I'd just like to remind you of Zoom etiquette. There's a lot of us in this room now, almost 100. So please mute yourself if you're not speaking. Our colleagues at the Budapest Hub will be monitoring this as well, I guess. So you might be muted for you if you don't do it yourself. You're able to write questions in the chat. And perhaps raise your hand. At the end of this first hour, there will be about 15 minutes for questions, and I'll be facilitating that. So I'll try and see who has any questions. Now, without much further ado, I would like to just jump into today's program and introduce our first speakers who are going to open this webinar. I'm not going to give you a very long and elaborate welcome, I'm afraid, in the interests of time. But first, can I please call on Laszlo Lovash? I'm also hoping I get names right, to open for us today. Laszlo. Is with us, is muted. I might take this opportunity as Laszlo's coming up. You would have heard the formal Zoom message, but this session is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, then just keep your camera off. Otherwise, feel free to keep your cameras on. People always like to see friendly faces while they're speaking. Laszlo, are you with us now?
Okay, welcome everybody. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Perfectly.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, really good afternoon and welcome to this fourth ERC starting grant mentoring event hosted by the Young Academia of Europe, actually in collaboration with the Academia Europaea Budapest Knowledge Hub. Actually, my name is Péter Hegyi, and I am really delighted to succeed Laszlo Lovash as academic director from June this year, who has done really an excellent job to leading and directing the hub. So if I think about the European Research Council grants are synonymous with scientific excellence. And it's our privilege to support and guide researchers in the pursuit of these prestigious grants. So the goal of this meeting, as far as I understand, is to widen participation and encourage researchers to apply and succeed. And we are really honored to have with us today distinguished speakers who will share invaluable insights into the ERC's evaluation process and recent changes. And their expertise actually and guidance will undoubtedly provide everyone with the knowledge and confidence needed to navigate the complexity of really this grant application. And during this time, I really would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for their dedicated work in making this event possible, especially to Katalin Solymosi, who is the chair of the Young Academy of Europe, for her outstanding leadership and commitment in this case. And of course, people really don't want to listen to me. So I just would like to finish quickly that thank you for joining us. And I really encourage everybody to take full advantage of this unique opportunity to advance their research careers. So thank you. Enjoy the meeting and apply as many as you can for ERC grants. So thank you very much, and I just let the meeting run and really goes on their own way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. In that case, we're then looking at our agenda. Moving on to our final speaker for the introduction is Katalin Solymosi, who is the chair of the Young Academy of Europe and my esteemed colleague.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, or there is some problem with the? Okay. So first of all, I think Professor László Lovász, who is member of the ERC Scientific Council, had some issues with joining us. We are working on it technically. So in between, I will then present a little bit the Young Academy of Europe for those who don't know it. It has been founded in 2012 by ERC starting grant winners, and since then we are working and trying to give back something to the researcher community. We are really grateful for the Academia Europaea Hub and all our speakers who accepted to be part of this event and make it possible. As previously Peter told and also Scott outlined, we want to increase participation of people from EU13 countries in ERC grants, the successful participation of them. And first of all, I would just like to take a few minutes to show you that this is already a kind of this is the fourth edition of this event, and everything you want to know about our former events are available on that homepage. The first one in 2020 focused already on EU13 countries. We had contributions from the ERC Executive Agency, and then also we discussed issues related to the geographic distribution of ERC grants on our end. All the breakout sessions, we had a similar structure, breakout sessions with advice coming from recent ERC starting grant holders. You can find them on our homepage and on our YouTube. And then the second event featured and was more focused, in addition, of course, to a plenary part, which contained information, general information about the grants by Janka Mátrai, and then some insight into typical comments during evaluation reports, especially for applicants from EU13 countries. And at the end of this event, we organized a specific type of mock evaluation panels per domain, in which the panels had one winner and funded and one unfunded proposition that they openly discussed among themselves to show to the applicants how evaluation work. Of course, these were no real evaluations, but I think if you go and check out on our homepage, it can be useful for you if you want to apply. Last year, we had an event which was focused on narrative CVs, because that was implemented, or that was a new format that is now requested. And we tried to provide insight, and we had one testimonial from a Young Academy of Europe member, Sari Mildai, who explained quite in detail how her narrative CV helped her to get an ERC grant. And this is now today our fourth event. And just a last slide about something that might be useful for applicants for this year. And this is an initiative on which we have been working for almost a year with 6 different funding agencies: the National Funding Agency of Luxembourg, of UK, of Ireland, of Switzerland, and of the Netherlands, along with the Wellcome Trust, and 2 researcher organizations, so the Marie Curie Alumni Association and the Young Academy of Europe. We made this open peer exchange platform where you can register. You can go on that homepage and register as a mentor or a mentee, and we are still already ongoing mentoring on this homepage, and we really believe it's important, especially for researchers from EU13 countries or anyone who had no previous experience or has no mentoring in preparing the narrative CV. So this is what I would like to outline. And thank you for your attention. And also, again, thanks all the speakers for accepting our invitations. And we are really honored to have the president of ERC, Maria Leptin, also among us.
Thank you very much, Catalin. With that, I think I see that Laszlo has now been able to join us. Laszlo, would you like to say a few words for us, please, to welcome the event? He is connecting to audio. And having some challenges potentially. It might be that in the interests of time, that we move on and I introduce our next speaker, and we can come back to Laszlo. This is always a challenge, isn't it, working through the Zoom platform. Then I would like to introduce our next speaker, who will give a little bit of an introduction into the why and the what of the ERC's recent changes to the evaluation of research proposals by Maria Leptin, who is president of the ERC. We're really honored to have you with us here, Maria. Please, I'm very, very honored to give you the floor. And you are still muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes. Thank you, Scott. And it's good to see so many interested people here. It's really wonderful. And it's exactly what we want. We want people to be interested, to learn about the ERC, and hopefully to come with good proposals. So Caroline, you sharing the slides? Thank you very much. They're still not good. Excellent. So no, go to the first one, please. Just go back. Thank you. Of course, one of the most important things that happens if and when you support a grant to the ERC is that your proposal will be looked at and that your accomplishment will be looked at. And this is done by expert panels with reviewers, referees who come from all over the world and who read your materials very carefully and then make judgments. Now, this, of course, happens not only at the ERC, this happens to you all the time. And it happens to you when you get a faculty position, when you get a fellowship, it happens for prizes, etc. And people, as you know, have become a little worried over the past 10, 15 years, especially young people, that the criteria by which people are judged, applicants, researchers are judged, may not be up to scratch. Now, I believe, and many of us believe, that the system that the ERC uses is really well adapted to find excellent proposals and excellent researchers. And the success has illustrated that. It's been, we have funded very successful projects and very successful researchers. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is perfect and that one can't improve. And so if you look at the next slide, the ERC, the Scientific Council, of which we have one member here, Laszlo, is always interested in making sure that what we consider an excellent selection system really is excellent and responds to the needs that come from the community. And you will be well aware that there have been changes in how scientists, researchers, and their outputs are judged over the past 20 years. So we have a few here that have come up and that are relevant to the ERC. In somewhere in the early 2010s or so, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment was launched that says that journal metrics should be used for assessing journals, but should not be used for assessing researchers. The ERC endorsed that declaration, signed it, and our panels are instructed not to use inappropriate research metrics such as the journal impact factor when they look at the output of the researchers they judge. So like I said, so that's one thing. In parallel, a group of people have, including members of the European Commission, have set out to think about how to improve research assessment and have set up a group called, it's not on here, yes, called Quora, and who've come up with an agreement on reforming research assessment. We've signed that too. However, we signed it actually at a time when we ourselves had already set in process internal motions to change our research assessment. So initially a task force, and then the entire scientific council, 22 people who guide and set the strategy for the ERC, discussed this and came up with, now there's an echo, came up with new ways of handling ERC applications. And these were introduced in the so-called work program for 2024, which is now in, which now applies. So let me talk you through these. Next slide, please. Yeah, here's the slide, exactly. So there are really two things that the panels judge. One is the proposal, and that is the most important one. I'll get back to that. But then the panels also have to assess whether the applicant, the proposer of that project, has the necessary experience and excellence to carry out the project. How is that measured? Well, of course, so in the past, there used to be two forms that provided the panels with the information needed to judge that. One was the so-called CV, and the other one was the track record. The distinction was not really clear to everybody, and so one thing we did was to combine them. And so we have now a combined form that contains three subheadings. The first is the personal details. So it's really just the actual timeline of what happened to you as in your career. You know, what were your degrees? Where did you get them? Where were you employed? And where are you now? Okay, so that is just sort of really the core about you. The next bit, can you go on, is, and this is probably the most important thing to know about the applicant, is their achievements in research. So this section contains two things. It's the actual achievements, your actual outputs, but then also how your peer community judges you, any evidence that your peers consider you excellent. So the research achievements, remember the ERC accepts applications from all sorts of fields, from the life sciences, including even medical sciences, from engineers, from philosophers, from astrophysicists, all the way to the humanities, historians, art historians, etc. And they, of course, have very different outputs. For some, for example, in my field, the life sciences, publications are the standard output, but in other fields that's different. And so we've been very clear now that we're looking at about two things. A, we are not prescriptive about what kinds of outputs, we just call them research outputs. And B, we limit them to 10. So it's not necessarily a long list. It's not quantity that matters, but it's quality. And what you consider quality is what you decide. So like I say, in the life sciences, it will very often most likely be research papers in scientific journals. But it could also be data sets that you've generated, large, important data sets that are not yet published, that are just online. It could be, in many fields, it could be code that you've developed and that are used by many others and that you've never bothered to put into a publication. In some fields, it may be expeditions. In others, it may be exhibitions. So it could be anything. The important thing about it is, how did it contribute to the advance of science, of the frontier of science in your field? That's what the panels want to know. So you're free to choose 10 of them. And if it's not obvious from the title, then you have a brief narrative in which you explain what it was that makes you decide that this was an important contribution to research. And the next one, so the other, no, sorry, back to last slide. I haven't done the prizes, etc. Peer recognition. Again, this will, of course, differ vastly. If you're an old lady like me, then you will have been elected to academies and you may have won prizes. I should say I've not won a single prize in my entire career. So you can have a successful career without prizes. But you will have, you know, a longer list than if you're just starting your own research group. Of course, the panels recognize that. But you may have been recognized in other ways. You may have had a prestigious fellowship. You may have won a poster prize, or, you know, anything goes. Anything that shows that you are seen that as having contributed in some important way. So that's the most important part, and make sure you fill that in properly if you apply. Okay, next and final is additional information. This is very difficult. Some of it is not difficult. Some of it is simple. Your career may not have been the sort of linear classic career, but you may have done other things. You may have been in industry. You may have done internships in political organizations, whatever. You may also have had difficulties, challenges in your life. You may have had to look after sick family members, or you may have had delightful events such as having children. All that can go in there. Anything that explains or that describes how your career has not been the standard bachelor's, diploma, PhD, and postdoc and group leader. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, you may have spent some of your time contributing to the community in other ways. You may have, like people we see here, contributed to the Young Academy of Europe and as being a leader there, or you may have been a mediator, conflict mediator in your institution. You may have, if you're more senior, been a leader of an academy or a scientific organization or whatever. So any of this is, of course, highly valued by the scientific community. If you've done this and you've put in a really lousy proposal, it won't rescue your proposal. If you've done a brilliant proposal and you've done, and you've not done anything of this, your brilliant proposal will also not be undermined. It's just to give the panel a more rounded view of you as a person. And of course, if this has required a lot of time, they may want to take this into account. So this is really just to say that it is recognized that good researchers contribute to the community in many other ways, and this should be listed here. Okay, I think that was the most important change. I mean, this combining, but let me tell you about a few more aspects. So, like I've said, the most important thing about your application is the proposal. It is expected to be original, ambitious, groundbreaking, etc., etc. We used to have the term high risk, high gain. We got rid of that term. So some people are asking me, what, you no longer want high risk projects? Of course we do. The reason we got rid of this high risk, high gain mantra is that high risk doesn't mean high gain. High risk might mean zero gain. So the conjunction gives a wrong impression. So high risk is fine, which means it shouldn't be completely insane and crazy, which is why we have this term of feasibility still in there. But you may also be able to propose a really high gain project with fairly little risk. For instance, because you've had a brilliant insight about something, you've recognized some new path that you might take, but for which you can use established methods. So that'll be a low risk, but potentially high gain subject. But what we do want is to see this spark, this idea, this creativity. That's the most important. you'll have to convince the panel that it's possible to do the project, not that it's guaranteed that it'll succeed. In order to focus the panel's thinking on the proposal, they will evaluate you as applicants, but we've gone away from numerical scoring of the PI to really focus the panels on the ideas in the project and ask about the PI only if the PI is capable and has the excellence. Okay, high risk, high gain is there, so I've already said that. We've also got rid of the term novel methodologies for a similar reason, Sure, novel methodologies are great because they suddenly enable you to answer a question which was not possible before because the methodology was lacking. So novel methodologies are always great. But again, you may have come up with a brilliant idea of how an existing method applied to a new question can solve a big problem. So we've got rid of the novel methodologies, but of course, inventing new methods is always helpful and usually has benefits beyond your own project. So they're still appreciated, but not made a condition. Okay, next, or made a specific environment. So this is actually the top level is not so. This is more the mechanics in the panel. We've changed a little bit the selection of the people who make it through the first step. In small panels, there can be now more. In very large panels, we've had to cap the number of proposals that can go to step 2. But what this means for you is that if you happen to find yourself in a very large panel, if your project is scored A, i.e. in principle worth looking at and worth interviewing, but you're not invited, then the restrictions that previously applied to you will no longer apply, and you are welcome to reapply next year. So that's in favor of applicants, and we're hoping that this will be of benefit to people who are judged highly, but not sufficiently high to make it to the interview step. Okay, and what's the next slide? These are just some things, those of you in social sciences and humanities who work in studies in cultures and art might care about. Some of the descriptors of the panels have been changed, and equally in the life sciences, 2 panels have received slightly broader definitions. Next slide, and there is no next slide. Good. So I'll be happy to answer questions. Scott, you said questions at the end. I'm wondering whether it might not be better to have questions for this part now, because I can only stay for a limited amount of time.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much, first of all, Maria, for a wonderful talk. No, we are going to have 10 minutes for questions now. But before we pass to that, I do have one matter of business I would like to do first. Since we weren't able to hear from Professor Laszlo Lovász before, I would like to invite you, please, Laszlo, to give us some welcoming words, and then we will have time for a few questions to Maria's talk, and then move on to the final talk of this first session. Please, Laszlo.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I am really sorry I fought with my microphone for half an hour. I just wanted to emphasize, greet everybody, and thank everybody for coming, and how extremely important ERC is. It's not only as a provider of funds, but as a measure, as a standard against which we can measure our own science, our own results. However, the 13 new members of the European community still have difficulty competing with the old members or the sort of those who have lived in democracy for longer. And the ERC recognizes this problem, and there are a lot of work has been done on widening participation. I don't think the results are that complete. I think there is no single reason why the 13 countries are not as successful as they should be. It's different culture, lack of experience, quality of available equipment, brain drain, a lot of other factors have been proposed. I believe that it's a combination of all of these. There is no wonder medicine, there is no one big decision that would rectify this situation. So we have to do step-by-step improvement, helping, giving information, and so on. And I think that this event is one of these small steps. And therefore, I would like to thank ERC, in particular, the president of ERC, Maria Leptin, but also the Hungarian Young Academy, the European Young Academy, the hub, Budapest Hub of the Academia Europaea, and the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for providing help with this event. And I am sorry that this should have been the first comments, but I had this technical problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are really important comments. And we have them, and we are going forward with those comments. Now we have time for 10 minutes for questions to Maria. Maria, I see 2 questions in the chat that I'm going to read out for you. One of them is, you're talking about the quality of 10 outputs, papers or otherwise. How might a reviewer recognize the quality of those, say, papers or other outputs? That's one. And the other one, I'll give you 2 at a time to chew on. The other one is, do these slides and do all the things you've spoken about now also apply to a consolidator and advanced grants? Is this more or less the same right the way up? You're muted.
Sorry. The second one is very easy. Yes, they apply across the board. That's for everyone. The first one is a very good question. How do you recognize quality? Now, that is the core of any evaluation. And, you know, there is an old adage, it takes one to know one. It's usually about idiots, and it takes an idiot to know an idiot. But of course, it's also about an excellent researcher. And that's why some people want to maintain impact factors. And they ask me, if you're not allowed to use what, you know, the fact where the paper was published, what does that mean? Well, yes. I mean, we're not wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If somebody has published all their papers in the leading journals of their profession, and someone else has published it in really third-rate journals where things aren't even properly reviewed, that's a difference. So overall, it does matter that you publish in recognized fora, but very often, especially as a starting researcher, especially in fields where it takes very long to get a paper reviewed, your paper may not be out, or you may, also the very top journals often select for sexiness, not for correctness, not for excellence. I mean, I can give you many, many examples. So that's why we have excellent panel members who know what is good. And then the next question is, do I have to read every paper that they submit? Of course not. You can read the abstract, but it's your duty to tell the panel, I've put in this paper, save yourselves these words, say, this paper has contributed to an advance for this reason. and, you know, my method that I developed here has been employed by X people, or, you know, what I've discovered here has led to another discovery or has been used, you know, it's up to you. And they will recognize the quality. And of course, a conscientious researcher they can't read all the papers, of course not, but they will either know it if we have an expert in the room, or they will have a glance at it. So it's a combination of using knowledge of the field, knowledge of the places where people put their best outputs, and a combination of recognizing what you're saying in your little narrative.
Thank you, Maria. I have two further questions, and then we'll skip to
I think there's an excellent one, if I may. I see them here.
Oh, fantastic.
It's the question of luck.
Yes.
All I can say is you are right. There is an element of luck. You know, so we receive far more superb top level proposals than we can fund. So the panel, there's always 3 or 4 that are absolutely glorious, where everybody in the panel agrees. And there's a whole bunch where people say, very nice, but they're not going to compete with those. And then there is a list where they all say, poof, they could compete with those. How the heck do we rank these? And that's where a little bit of luck comes in, you know, and the panels recognize it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you may find that there are people on that day who are excited by the exact words you chose to describe your panel or not. What that means is, where I'm heading at is, we all know this, and it means, and this is something you need to recognize and be aware of, if you don't succeed, doesn't mean you're a loser. It only means you didn't succeed this time. Either you didn't do something right, you learn about that, you can improve, or you were just unlucky. Either way, you have to keep going at it. We recently had a grantee who received their grant at the 7th trial. So people who say, I've applied for the ERC, they didn't see my brilliance, it's clearly not for me. They're just dumb. So please don't be dumb. Keep trying. However, having said that, somebody asked, is it still time to apply for a grant? Well, it's May now. No, it's June. Most people most successful grantees have spent around 3 months focusing entirely on writing the grant. So you don't sit down and do it overnight. You don't do it in 2 weeks. You don't start 4 or 6 weeks before the deadline and then submit what you've got. You do it a long time in advance. You consult with all your enemies, not your next door friends, them first, but then your enemies, to make sure you've got it right. You sign up for the mechanisms that the ERC has to link you up with mentors who will help you, who will guide you. You need critique. And you don't get critique, by the way, you don't get useful critique from commercial grant writing agencies. They will immediately be recognized by the panels as being boring and middle of the road. They want to see your originality. You also don't get excellence by saying your project is groundbreaking, et cetera, So please, to get an ERC grant requires a huge effort, and not just for you, but also for the very top leading researchers in the top leading institutions. They spend 3 months and they do everything I just said.
Thank you very much, Maria. That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you again very much for joining us, sharing with us some of the evolution in the ERC evaluation process at the moment, and fielding some questions. To ensure the time doesn't slip too much, I'm going to introduce our final speaker of this session, who is Angela Liberatore, who is the head of the Scientific Management Department at the ERC, and she's going to be talking about implementing the novelties in ERC evaluations. Angela, can you please share your screen and go ahead? Thank you.
I'm wondering actually whether Kathleen would do it, because I saw it worked well with Maria, and with my double screen, I might otherwise end up in showing the screen instead of the presentation. Would that be okay for you, Kathleen?
Yes,
That's brilliant. Thank you. So first of all, I see there are questions that Maria didn't have the chance to answer yet. So
I will answer some of them in the chat.
Okay, very good. Otherwise, I'll try to answer those, but have a look at it, Maria. I see that there are a couple of them. So I will actually speak about evaluation a bit more broadly, because Maria did explain the why and the how. The Scientific Council decided to change some of the evaluation elements. Of course, this is what we are implementing. We can go directly to the next slide. And I see we will go with some very quickly, Katerina. We can go to the next. And voila. So first of all, you know what ERC is about, but to make it very clear, it's part of Horizon Europe with a significant budget, but with a budget that we hope, Scientific Council hopes, and others will be increased in the future Framework Program 10, because we have definitely more proposals that are excellent than the proposals we can fund. So this is one of the elements. And Maria here is the president of the Scientific Council, meaning this is who establishes the strategy for ERC. And I'm in the executive agency implementing the strategy, particularly in our department. We run the evaluation as well as the scientific monitoring and other things. You know that we are covering all areas of research and scholarship in all the 3 domains that you see here, and that we have a number of grants, and that one of the pride and important elements of ERC is to be bottom-up, meaning leaving completely to the researchers the choice of the topics they want to address, the way they want to address it, and of course the demonstration of why this is new for pushing the frontiers of science. We can go to the next, Catalina, and thank you for. So these are the grant scheme. So I saw that one of the questions was whether what Maria explained only applies to starting grants or to all. And as Maria replied, what was said applies to all grants of ERC, starting grants, consolidator grants, advanced grants, synergy grants. Proof of concept is a bit different, because proof of concept, it is added to proof of concept, which has been developed in one of the main grants. So this has some specificities. So here you see the eligibility windows, as well as the budget that goes, the duration. So the grants are 5 years for the mono-beneficiary grants, 6 years for synergy grants. This is intentional because shorter times means that people have already to look for the next grant when they are not even in the middle of what they are doing. So this is quite by design. We can go to the next slide. And the reason to apply for an ERC grant is indeed to be able to have this, good time to really develop research without having to worry for the next one. Total independence and freedom in the choice of the topic and field to be addressed, financial autonomy. It's also one of the ways for principal investigators and their teams to negotiate the best conditions of work with the host institutions. And this is also why we have portability, meaning that if a host institution doesn't provide the best conditions, people can be headhunted by other host institutions and exercise portability, meaning take the grant and team and somewhere else. Having said that, it's also useful to know that people can keep a double affiliation. This is a question we often get, for example, for Europeans outside Europe who want to go back to Europe with a grant, for example, or to non-European nationals who want to spend part of their research work in Europe with a grant. So it doesn't mean you have to give up your affiliation somewhere else, but you can keep it. And this, of course, also within Europe. And the notion is that portability and everything that ERC does is to try to promote brain circulation, not brain drain. I'm telling you because I'm Italian, and very often people in Italy say ERC is leading, mainly having Italians abroad. And in fact, our data show that those were abroad before applying to ERC, and that in several cases, they got offered to go back to the home country thanks to the ERC grant that they got. And I think this is an important element also for those of you coming from widening countries or having some concerns about this issue. We also have additional funding that very often comes after the grant. We can go to the next slide. Now, somebody was asking about the calendar. So this is the calendar for Work Program 24, which is the one which is being implemented now, which means that we are now finalizing the evaluation of starting grants and soon the one for consolidator grant. We just opened the advanced grant call, which will be open until August. Synergy also started together with starting grants in July, so we are also finalizing the evaluation, and the proof of concept have several dates. See, yes, I see 23. Yes, that was indeed the time of publication. We publish, for example, we will publish the Work Program 25 in July 24. So this means that in 25, for Work Program 25, we will have, for example, the opening of starting grants and synergy grants in 24, and we will have the evaluation that we will finish in 25. So you have to think that we always need to plan ahead. So indeed, this is the work program which is ongoing. Therefore, some of the dates are in the past. So if you want to apply for the future, you will have to apply either for advanced grant if you are in the advanced grant cohort, or wait for work program 25 that should be published in July. Actually, we are fighting hard to make sure that we have the work program adopted in time for starting grants and synergy to be published in July. And of course, what Maria already said means that you will see the work program 25 in July, and then you will have, for example, till a date in October to submit, but you know, if you have some ideas, you better start working on them already, and then of course go into the actual writing and detailing when you see the call. We can go to the next slide, Kathleen. Thank you. This is the evaluation panel structure. Maria mentioned that there is a new panel in the Social Sciences and Humanities, the SH8 on Studies of Culture and Arts, which is new as a panel, but it takes from descriptors that were in the previous panels, particularly SH5 before, so it's a reorganization. Now, when the Scientific Council adds panels, normally it is to address 2 points. One is to, try to equalize a bit more the number of applications that go to panels. Some of the panels are extremely large, which means many applications, and to avoid that the quality of the evaluation suffers from overload, we need to try to equalize as much as we can. So let's say quantity is one of the elements. The other element is some kind of coherence in the, let's say, research field, which of course is in continuous evolution. So this means also that those are the titles, there are subtitles, and then there are a list of descriptors. Those are not normative topics. It's just a way for applicants to find themselves where they think is the core of their application. in a specific panel addressing a certain area of research and scholarship, and sometimes can be in between panels. And in that case, we have so-called cross-panel reviews, and I can explain more if you're interested. We can go to the next slide, which is about, and you can go ahead, excellence is indeed the evaluation criterion, and it's about the research project and the principal investigator. And Maria explained everything about those two criteria, particularly with regard to the changes that were made in Work Program 24. So I will not comment more about that, apart from questions that might arise. Here is how it works. We have two steps in the evaluation, and at step 1, you can go ahead, clicking all the rest. At step 1, we have a remote assessment by the panel members for the first part of the proposal, the so-called part B1. As applicants, you will see that you have a part A, which is basically administrative information plus budgetary information. And then there is a part B1, which is the synopsis of the proposal and the CV of the applicant, and a part B2 that is basically the full proposal. So at step 1, the evaluation is about the part B1, which means that in part B1, you need to be able to convince the panel that you are advancing the state of the art, that you have some breakthrough that you want to achieve, and give some elements on how you think you can do that. And on the CV, Maria explained how it is now structured to give more visibility also to other achievement apart for example, from publications. This is assessed remotely, and then the panel meetings are made on site in Brussels. So the panel members, who are all generalists, however, doesn't mean just, the person on the street is taken in the panel meeting room. It means they are covering the field of one given panel. But of course, the specific proposals can be quite different. Oh yes, Scott, I see. So let's rush up a little bit. After panel step 1, there is feedback to the applicants, either thank you, you gave it a try, but not good enough for now, or you are invited to step 2. Step 2 means that there are interviews, and this is where based on the full proposals, as well as inputs from so-called remote reviewers, meaning specialists of one and the other proposal, the interviews take place with questions for clarification, expansion, and so on and so forth. On the basis of this, there is a ranked list, which says those are the proposals for funding, including reserved list, or very high but not enough for funding in this round. And attached to that, there are submission restrictions, meaning if you go to step 2, you can come back next year. If you take, for example, a C in step 1, you have to wait 2 years to, let's say, make the have more maturity in the proposal. We can go to the next. I will actually skip this and the next, Katarina, because Maria explained everything. Now, I wanted to make some mention, because they are relevant for applications also, of 2 important policies in ERC. One is about equality, diversity, and inclusion. And this is incorporated in our eligibility criterion, as well as in the evaluation and project implementation. So one of the things that really had been a successful policy of ERC, when it was seen back in FP7 that there was a serious success rate gap between men and women among the applicants, it was to have eligibility extension for maternity leave, as you see, for each child, as well as any time of parental leave for the other parent. We also address single parents as necessary. We also take care about the care of sick relatives. Maria was mentioning that this is part of the life event that can happen. We also have a ground for extension about long-term illnesses, which can also be, by the way, mental illnesses, as well as disability, which is now singled out, not part of long-term illness. 3 minutes, thank you. We have also the grant for extension, asylum-seeking national service, major natural and human-caused disaster. Sorry for the typo. In the proposal, as Maria said, as of 24, we give more weight to the project as compared to the track record. This is something that was mentioned several times, to be able really to value the research, the idea, and to, let's say, how to say, go away from anything that could be related to reputation more than the actual excellence of the idea submitted. You heard about the CV, and for you to be aware that we are briefing all our panel members on unconscious bias, and you can see actually the slides on the basis of which Maria briefs our panel members, so that you are also thinking about how you will be evaluated and with what care if you apply. We can go to the next slide. And very quickly, an element which it's important to take into account is that we have a scientific evaluation. We also have, only for proposals that goes ahead and are selected in the scientific evaluation, we also go for ethics review. This is important for compliance with important legislation such as the General Data Protection Regulation or animal welfare and environmental protection, but of course also with regard to respect for research subjects such as vulnerable groups, children, patients, refugees, what have you, and the importance of shared benefit. So for the applicants, it's important to note that there is an ethics self-assessment to be filled, and that there is an ethics review procedure by which successful applicants successful in the scientific evaluation might be asked to provide some more elements if necessary, and at the link you find all the guidance that you might need. And to conclude, we have a mentoring initiative for ERC applicants. This is actually quite important. We would say, I can say more about that. There is now an ongoing expression of interest, and for the first time we will include our Ukrainian colleagues, who are very happy about this. We can go to the next, which is the Visiting Fellowship Program. It's another instrument that can be used for short visits that potential ERC candidate might use to gain experience with ERC funded teams. And I think I conclude on this. So we are on time. And if you have questions, of course, we can go deeper in any of the points that I made.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Really fantastic and excellent on keeping to time. We are slightly over time, of course. These things happen, but I would like to leave 5 minutes for questions. So if there are 1 or 2 questions for Angela, please write them in the chat. I think Angela and Maria have been a fantastic team in kind of managing the questions in the chat. So it might be we don't have too many questions. We do have one here. Are the reviewers of the panel selected for each proposal, or is the reviewer randomly chosen in each panel? One panel is too broad, and I'm worried about the lack of expertise for the review. Angela, you can see it.
Okay, so yes, the panel members, which are in a number ranging from 13 to 18, depending on the size of the panels, meaning the applications received are, as I said, generalists, but meaning they are expert in the field of the panel, but not necessarily for each of the proposal. Now, when we go to step 2, the remote reviewers are really the specialist. And as you know, the panel members are identified and appointed by our scientific council, so by other scientists, and the remote reviewers are suggested by the panel members, so again, by other scientists, saying we need a specialist about this or about this for each of the proposal. So indeed, they are the reviewers are selected for each proposals, while the panel, of course, are done earlier. In fact, we invite people 2 years in advance to be able to block their calendars, and they look at all proposals in a particular panel one panelist too broad, and I'm worried about the lack of expertise for the review. So this is the point. This is why we have the panels acting as generalists, and for the step 2 proposals, we have the remote referees acting as specialists. So I hope that I clarified.
Just one last question, but I think we then need to go to breakout rooms. But this
budget
isn't
smaller than 1.5, by the way. Yes, the budgetary ceilings are ceilings, meaning if you apply to a starting grant, you can apply for 1.5 million. And if you need additional funding for, experimentation, infrastructure, whatever, instrumentation, you can add 1 million that you have to explain would be additional for that. Having said that, for each of the ceiling, it means if you don't need to go up to the ceiling, you're most welcome to submit a smaller proposal. In fact, one of the things that panels sometimes spot is when people are either pushing themselves or are pushed by their host institution to go for the maximum and add things in the proposal that really have no bearing. And this overfloating of budget just to get to the ceiling is actually not serving the purpose. So just go for the resources you need for the proposal you want to have. And of course, there are differences. We have Laszlo here. He's a mathematician. A mathematician and an engineer typically might need a bit of different kind of resources, and this might be reflected in the budget, and the same can happen with a philosopher or an archaeologist or a cell biologist and an ecologist. So go for what is really relevant for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of our speakers and to those of us who welcomed in this first session. Thank you very much. I believe now we're moving to the second phase of this webinar, where we're going to break into breakout rooms according to domain. Here I am out of my depth, and I'm going to thank you all very much and ask perhaps Catalin or someone from the Budapest Hub to explain how we move into those breakout rooms.